Hey folks, David Stewart here, Downer Dave. Down with a little bit of a perspective for you on World of Warcraft and an announcement. Blizzard has announced that they already have Legion Patch 7.1 in the works, and it's going to be coming out. It is called Return to Karazhan. Karazhan 2.0, and this has a lot of people excited. There's a lot of hype up for it. There's a lot of hype for Legion in general. I made another video about why that hype I think is unwanted, but I just want to talk about this thing in particular. You guys know I like to give you a different perspective, and you know where I'm coming from. I prefer the game as it was much more to the game as it currently is, but I do think a lot of this hype is the result of the current game design, so I kind of want to dig into that a little bit and tell you why I think people are excited about it and why I think it might end up being a little bit of a letdown. There's a bit of my perspective. So the first reason I think people are very excited, which is one that should not be overlooked, is that Blizzard is pre-announcing content post-expansion, which is a big shift from the way it was with Warlords of Draenor. So they're saying we're already working on all of this content that's going to come out post-launch, and that has a lot of people very, very excited to buy into this, because what we got with Warlords of Draenor was we got like 2 additional raids, and that's pretty much it. And then they just kind of petered out and let the thing die for like a year and a half. And that upset a lot of people. So you got Highmaul, then you got Blackrock Foundry, and then finally you got Hellfire Citadel, and then they're just like, well, okay, we're done. Right? They just kind of ejected themselves from Warlords of Draenor as they came to realize that the expansion wasn't that good, other than some of the leveling experience, I think. So people are excited. Should not be overlooked that it looks like they are pre-planning a lot of content. Just to pull back on that a little bit, keep in mind how much content other expansions launched with, particularly Burning Crusade, which this expansion attempts to be emulating here with Karazhan. The other reason I think people are very hyped about this is that they really liked Karazhan. Karazhan I consider probably the best raid that World of Warcraft ever had in it, the best raid Blizzard ever designed, and I could make a whole video about that, but the short of it is that I think it is really good aesthetically, and it was really good in terms of gameplay for the time, and I think it holds up. And it was good enough that people played it basically from when they started Burning Crusade all the way until Burning Crusade ended, because you got those badges of justice off of all the bosses, and it was a pretty efficient badge of justice run and a fun badge of justice run, even when you're at very high levels of the raid content. So if you were doing a really high level, you're doing Sunwell, you still might be doing Karazhan every week to get the badges to buy all the other little pieces of gear, or buy like the primal nethers or whatever to sell to people. I did Karazhan like every week from the first week until like the expansion ended, pretty much, and I never really got bored with it. I pretty much enjoyed it the whole time. So that speaks to me a lot about the quality of that particular piece of content. And I think one of the reasons that people are excited to have it come back is because we haven't had that content be current in quite a few years. You can go back, you can solo the raid, but it's not the same as doing it with a group of 10 people. When you do it with a group of 10 people, then you're really having that raid experience, and that hasn't existed for a long time. People are excited to have that back. I think there's an element of nostalgia for those of us who played back in Burning Crusade, and for people who didn't, now they get, and that's going to be a 5-man version, by the way. It's not going to be a 10-man, but they're going to get like a little bit of the taste of the aesthetics and stuff from the Karazhan raid. So I think that has a lot of people excited. So the big one, they're pre-planning content, and then also it's Karazhan, one of the best raids ever. However, I'm gonna pull back on that a little bit. It's a little bit lazy to just kind of rehash content. This isn't a total rehash. They're remaking it. It's going to be new and different. So it's not like Nax, and it's not really like that version of ZG they did. So with Nax, a lot of people thought this was lazy. They took Nax out of vanilla, and then they went and put it in Wrath of Lich King. It became the first raid tier of Wrath of Lich King to kind of buy time or something, I guess. And a lot of people were very excited about it, and a lot of people were very critical about it. The people that were critical about it said correctly that it was lazy to just redo old content, and it was also not indicative of the real Nax experience, because the real Nax experience was insanely difficult. And one of the reasons they wanted to bring this Nax content over is that so few people actually got to do Nax in vanilla. Like it was it was a staggeringly tiny portion of the population that ever completed Naxx, like killed Kel'Thuzad and actually got to see the ending of vanilla World of Warcraft. It was such a small percentage that Blizzard was like, this is good content, we want everyone to experience it. So they brought it over, and I do understand that perspective. And it really wasn't that bad. It was much easier than the original Naxx. Even adjusted for everything, it was much easier. But it made a good first raid tier, and it also bought them time to make Ulduar, which I consider the second best raid that they ever did, both aesthetically and in terms of gameplay and everything they did with it. Ulduar was awesome, in my opinion. My experience, I thought Ulduar was a great raid. So they're bringing back Karazhan, which is going to be a little bit lazy. And when I think about this, when I finally heard this, I was like, man, they just keep trying to remake Burning Crusade. Like, everyone thinks Burning Crusade was the best expansion, so they just keep trying to redo it. Rather than, like, having the design of Burning Crusade come back, they're just bringing back the aesthetics and, like, the place. So, like, Warlords of Draenor was Outland again, right? It's like, oh, hey, guys, remember how great BC was? Here it is again, right? But now, like, the bad stuff hasn't happened, so it's different. It's like that actually really, like, appealed to me and made me want to resub to the game. But those feelings died off quickly when the game design wasn't there to support it. And now we have Legion, which is like an aesthetic remake of Burning Crusade, is what it feels like. Certainly, like, a lot of the like the Demon Hunter Zone just looks like Shadow Moon Valley, like a better, higher resolution version of it. It's like it's same but different, you know. So I kind of got that feeling from it, which doesn't leave me with a great feeling about it. Now, the reason I think people have like this hope that Karazhan's going to be really good when they rehash it, like I said, they haven't gotten to do the actual content of Karazhan in a number of years because it hasn't. There's been no reason to do it with the 10-man raid at level 70, and not with certainly not with the skills that were available at the time. And that has to do with Blizzard's current design philosophy when it comes to like patch updates. And this is where I really think the game design can affect players and their perceptions a little bit, because if this game design didn't exist, I think people would be much more upset about having Karazhan come back. I think if you did this sort of thing in like EverQuest, people would be really upset about it, or in any other game that doesn't have WoW's current sort of in-game design philosophy, because people will be like, we already did Karazhan, we don't need to see it again. It already exists. If we want to do Karazhan, we go do it. And the design right now, and this has been this way since Wrath of the Lich King, really, and it is this way because you have multiple difficulties and then multiple levels of gear within each raid. Is that raid progression no longer happens like it did in Burning Crusade and before, where you have, Karazhan moving to a next harder raid like, Gruul's and Magtheridon moving to SSC and TK to Black Temple, and Hyjal all the way down to Sunwell. You don't have a progression from easy raids to hard raids. You have first raid, High Maul, that you do at 3 different difficulties, like actually 4: Raid Finder, Normal, Heroic, Mythic. And then the next one comes out, Blackrock Foundry, and you do the Raid Finder stuff, and it's like better than the Normal and some of the Heroic High Maul gear. So you do Normal and Heroic, and then finally Mythic, Blackrock Foundry, and then Hellfire Citadel comes out and you do the same thing again. So the progression happens all within the same raid tier, which makes the player experience much more bland to me. It's like, oh, well, this expansion has these patches. All the population is shoved into whatever the most current patch is. So nobody is playing any of the older raids. Like, even when Blackrock Foundry came out, I couldn't find like any mythic raids to go try to do like Cho'Gall. People weren't really doing them because they're like, why would you do that? Because the gear isn't as good as like Heroic, Blackrock Foundry, and this is easier, so we'll just do this, So it's like, that's sort of how it is. And it's kind of been that way since Burning Crusade, because Burning Crusade had the 10-man and 25-man, or not Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King. And that made you have a bigger item gap between each raid, because you had to have like a lower level and a higher level gear, and then the next raid had lower level, higher level, lower. So you ended up not having a lot of overlap. Like Wrath of the Lich King had more overlap, but there's not a lot of overlap between the difficulty levels in Warlords of Draenor. So that means that anything that's not the current patch is just irrelevant. It's not played, and certainly if it's from a previous expansion, nobody does the large group content at all. Nobody does the old raids because they're irrelevant. Like, why would you go do Karazhan at level 70? Why would you get 10 people together when you can, at level 70, walk out to Borean Tundra and do like 5 quests and get better gear than what was available in Karazhan? Like, there's no reason to do it from a power perspective, that quest for power that I talked about. So people don't do it. Whereas if you had a design philosophy where those, there was a much smaller gap in the item level, you might have more incentive to do Karazhan. And I know they did the item level squish a little bit, and that I think actually helped quite a bit. But the culture wasn't there to support the necessity of going through raid content one after the other, and to really see the old content. It's just not there. Like, culture isn't there. So that means that when people get to hear that, oh, this thing that I really liked, they're going to bring it back and make it even better, I can understand how that excites people. However, I don't think it's going to end up being that good, because I think the best way, if you want to experience nostalgia, is probably to just go do it on a legacy server the way it originally was, with all the original aesthetics and all the original mechanics intact for you to do it. Like, I like the idea of time walking dungeons. I don't think they worked out because, the time walking dungeon, you're using your current skills in the time walking dungeon, so the design's not there. You can kind of see how overpowered the skills become when you go back and do Shattered Halls, and it's really, really easy. Back in the day when you needed like tier 6 to make Shattered Halls easy in Burning Crusade. Anyway, so I like the idea of time walking dungeons, but there's no like time walking raids that I know of, unless I like mixed some patch in there to make the older raids somehow relevant and able to be experienced closer to how they originally were. So I understand the nostalgia, but I think it's going to kind of melt when you actually like do this 5-man dungeon, and it's not quite the same, and you just kind of remember how cool Karazhan was. I don't think that's the best way to do nostalgia, is to keep rehashing the aesthetics of the older expansions, and keep rehashing the same dungeon content, and keep rehashing the same continents and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that's the best way to go about it. Really, what it says to me is that Blizzard knows that like they haven't that their older stuff was better, like I believe it is, and they're trying to deliver that, but at the same time they're trying to deliver the old stuff that was good in the current design philosophy, in the current way that the game is, rather than delivering new interesting stuff for the people who like the way that the game is right now. And like, I'm not going to say that you are not allowed to like the game the way it is right now. I like it the way it was. That's just the way I like it. And if you like the current design of the game, that's cool. But I think you shouldn't be that excited about like older stuff just being made again for you. Like they're trying to give you the better stuff. They should give you new things. New things should be interesting. And the thing is, like, if Legion felt more original after playing the beta with it, if it felt more original, I'd be a lot more inclined to buy the expansion, even though it's not containing a lot of design elements that really excite me. But that's all I have to think about that. I don't think that I'm that hyped about it. Yeah, I know that they're pre-announcing a lot of content. That's a good idea. I know that people really liked Karazhan. That's cool. I would suggest you find a BC realm to play Karazhan on if you really, really enjoyed it. Not that I would endorse you doing anything illegal, but that to me would be the best way to enjoy BC content. You guys have a great day, and I will see you later.